Brian Requarth. He's the co-founder of Viva Real and the founder of Latitude, is our next storyteller. He's built and scaled companies through these seasons. He's invested in over 200 startups all across Latin America. He was just telling me the last one he sold 600 million. I think he has some stories he's going to share with us today in his inspiring keynote. I'm going to let you take it from here. Please welcome Brian to the stage, our next storyteller.
Have you ever tried to do the impossible? I bet you have. If you're here in this room, you're probably in the midst of doing something impossible. That hill you're about to climb, full of challenges, full of the unexpected. What gets me going through the day is knowing that I can overcome anything. I will adapt. I will overcome. You see, that's my mantra, adapt and overcome. There's something in me that knows that I can do that. When I was 11 years old, I was excited because we were headed out for summer vacation with the family. We were headed to Jamaica, and I was excited not because of the crystal clear water or the beautiful sandy beaches. I was excited for a different reason. I was excited because I was going to get to try real coconut water. See, we don't get real coconut water like you do in Guatemala. So when I got there, I made it a mission. I had to find a coconut. And I found one. Victory. I took that coconut and I presented it to my parents with pride, and I asked them to open it for me. They wouldn't open it for me. They wouldn't even give me a knife either. I guess the idea of a hard coconut, a 11-year-old, and a sharp knife, maybe not the best combination. But that's how my folks are. They won't stop me from doing certain things, but they won't do everything for me either. It became my mission. I had to open that coconut. And I carried that coconut with me for 3 days, stomping on it, slamming it on the ground. And finally, on the third day, I looked down and I smiled because I saw a brick and I knew I had a chance. So I picked up that brick, raised it over my head, and with the force of Thor, crack, I got that coconut wide open. I could now enjoy the delicious, warm coconut water. You know what? Coconut water never tasted so good. This is me doing it the easy way afterwards. Now, this story is not about coconut water, right? This is about being faced with an impossible task and figuring out a way to get it done. Because to be an entrepreneur, you have to have determination. When someone says no, you say, what's next? When someone says it can't be done, you get it done. Anyone else here relate to that as an entrepreneur? Thank you. Now, fast forward to me selling my company. Here I was, I'd poured my blood, sweat, and tears into this business, and I was doing the unthinkable. I was separating myself from this thing that I'd created. And I struggled a little bit with it. It was a time of a lot of reflection, and as I was waiting, I really thought more about my purpose, connecting with what Barry was saying. What is my purpose? How am I going to contribute to my community, to society? And I came across a really cool concept. It's a Japanese concept, and it's called ikigai, if anyone's ever heard of it. Ikigai is a loose translation. It's kind of reason for being, or como razón de ser en español, más o menos. So I came across this concept, and it really struck me, and I thought deeply about this process. Now, going back to when I was a kid, I did have purpose. I will crack open that coconut so that I can make some money and have the freedom to do the things that I want as a kid. Now, that's exactly what I did. This is me in my first business. I taught neighborhood kids swim lessons in my backyard, and you know what? Business was pretty good for a high schooler. I ended up, I think my best week I had was $1,000 of revenue that week. Pretty good for a 17-year-old summertime job. Now I say revenue because my parents, they took 15% off the top. That was my first lesson in operating experiences. But I love teaching these kids. But above all, I actually love the freedom that I got from the money that I made because I could do the things that I wanted, right? And I don't think I'm unique in that way. You know, we pursue our passion and purpose. It's our why so that we can do the things that we want. I don't think that's unique to me. I think every entrepreneur has passion and purpose. You may not know you have it, but you definitely have it. And, you know, passion and purpose, it doesn't have to be something, you know, eternal. It can be something temporary. You could be setting out to build a business because, you know, maybe you want to change the world in some capacity, or maybe you just want to build something that people want. But the key thing is you have to have it. You have to have purpose in some capacity. So the purpose that would send me down this path of becoming an entrepreneur was a rather predictable reason. And it was to be closer to a girl. Well, that's not exactly the whole story, but I'll tell you about that in a second. So I got in my car and I drove from California to Costa Rica. And in fact, I got the privilege of seeing Guatemala por tierra, right, in carro. So I got to drive through crisscross through Mexico, and I ended up getting eventually to Costa Rica. Now, one thing about, you know, my purpose, I'd set out on this journey. You know, I just graduated college, right? So I knew that there was a plan for me to start a business. It was something intrinsic inside me, but I wasn't quite ready. So I took this epic journey with a friend, and there was two things that I wanted. I wanted to travel a lot, which I started doing, and then I wanted to be closer to my college girlfriend, Andrea, who was from Colombia, and she'd gone back to Colombia after being in San Diego. So my purpose was now shifting from wanting to travel, because I'd done that quite a bit, to wanting to be closer to her. And so I sold the Burro Blanco. You saw the car. That was the name we called the camioneta. El Burro Blanco trabajó como un burro durante muchos meses. And I ended up arriving to Colombia. Now, when I got to Colombia, my pockets were pretty empty, right? Here I am in Colombia, gringo. I didn't speak much Spanish at the time. And I had to find a place to stay, right? It's, you know, kind of the first thing you do. And so being a gringo, I ended up looking for, you know, as an American, you know, we have something, if you've, you know, been to the States, you see like signs off the freeway for, you know, Motel 6, right? Which is kind of like, it's like McDonald's for temporary housing, right? It's kind of inexpensive place to rest your head. And so I got to Bogota, and I got off the plane, found the place, you know, the cheapest place I could find, you know, dropped my bags off, and we went out on an evening on the town. Now, I'd been living for 6 months as a backpacker, right? Sleeping on the beach, you know, whoever would take me in. And all of a sudden, I got thrust into this kind of little higher society Bogota environment. We went to the theater that night, the first night. We went out to dinner. And it was after that that I had one of my first lessons in language and culture, where we were headed home, and her family asked me, you know, I needed a ride. There's no Uber back then. So they gave me a ride, and, you know, I accepted the invitation to get dropped off. And when we pulled up to the place, I could sense some kind of strange energy in the room. It felt a little heavy. It was a little intense. And it was that moment when I realized the difference between a motel in Latin America and a motel in the US. This was a place that you rented by the hour. So awkward, to say the least, right? So I'm glad you appreciate that. It took me 10 years to get over that psychologically. So the fact that I can share it now, I'm very happy that you enjoyed it. So I ended up, you know, getting up the next day. I've obviously got to find a place to stay, right? So I'm on now a hunt to find an apartment. I need to find a place, you know, that's a little more reasonable. So, you know, I end up picking up the classifieds. In fact, I think I have a picture of that was the motel. I found it on Google Maps. It looks better now. But, so I ended up picking up the classifieds to try to find a property, an apartment. And I talked to one real estate agent, and he was like, oh, I've got the perfect property for you. And so I'm like, great, let's go. So we ended up meeting at a cafe, and I said, let's, he's, I've got perfect property, you're gonna love it. And I said, great, and let's go check them out. And then he pulls out a piece of paper out of his briefcase, and there was 15 properties on the list. And he said, the place you're looking for is here. I'm like, good, let's do it. And he then proceeded to kind of wag his finger at me. No, that's gonna be 15,000 pesos. So he wanted to charge me to see the information. And frankly, I thought that was pretty unfair, and I was pretty upset about it. But then I remembered where I was staying, and I reluctantly pulled the money out, paid the guy, and I got my hands on this list. And I proceeded the next day to visit all of these properties. First one already rented. Second one, too big, too expensive. And I ended up coming away completely empty-handed, and it was a complete waste of the day. Now, we have a word in English that I really like. The word, it's serendipity. So I don't know if you've heard the word serendipity. Serendipity, what makes serendipity, it's kind of a chance encounter, if you will. It's a chance encounter, but what makes it different than luck is you have to do something with it. So in some way, you change or you adapt. And so a moment of serendipity, realized it dawned on me, there's no central repository of all of these properties in one place. That seems an inefficiency that could be better. So I kind of took note of that, and it was something that I stored somewhere in my head, wasn't ready to quite solve it yet. I ended up finding an apartment thanks to my wife, and she was embarrassed also, but we found a place. And I proceeded to need to make money, right? Because here I am, wanting to extend my dream of spending more time. I was kind of falling in love with the country and also the girl, and so I needed some money. And so the only thing I could do at the time to make money, I didn't really have many qualifications to work anywhere, spoke a little bit of Spanish, didn't have a degree in business. So I ended up buying a book to teach business English to executives at a trade show. I bought a book. And then I started walking the streets of Bogota, Colombia, pitching my classes to teach English. I knew that people wanted to learn English. And just bear with me, just imagine this, I'm walking the streets of Bogota. I've got this suit, the only suit that I had, which I'd bought at the Salvation Army in San Diego, a used suit. It was a little short on the cuffs, so I kind of had to walk like this so it didn't look like my hands were hanging out. And Bogota's a very formal city, right? People get dressed up. It's kind of elegancia. And so I ended up, and I saw these big skyscraper buildings, and it was, okay, how am I gonna get into these buildings? And I remember I slipped by security. I kind of had this, I'm a little embarrassed to say it, but I kind of used the gringo, no hablo español, got through security, and then I'd stop at every floor and pitch my classes. Rejection, rejection, rejection. I finally got to the 16th floor, and there was a stock brokerage called Corredores Asociados, and I ran into the head of HR in the lobby, and it turns out they were looking for an English teacher. So I closed my first contract, crisis averted, I could continue to stay, pursue the girl. It funded my 6 months of living expenses. And I ended up 3 or 4 months in, I had overstayed my visa. So now I'm in this predicament where my visa's out, I have to go to the immigration office. And it turns out that I'm in there waiting to make this payment, this multa, and I see a guy with a German passport, and he's in front of me in line. And I remembered that I had a student who was an executive that wanted to learn German. So I struck up a conversation with this guy, Thomas, and I said, hey, by chance, do you want to teach some German classes? He was broke, he also needed some money. And so we ended up getting together, having all these conversations. He didn't teach, but we ended up having both an interest in technology and interest in business and entrepreneurship. And we actually got together, a very odd place to meet your co-founder in immigration, but we ended up starting a business together, and the business actually went pretty well. Thomas and I, we first built websites for anyone that would, I built a Christmas tree farm website in California. Eventually, I kind of kept coming back to this real estate thing. I'm like, I think a lot of people make a lot of money in real estate. I might as well think about this as an opportunity. And so we started building these real estate websites for Spanish-speaking agents in the US. We could call via Skype and do our presentations and close contracts in the US and make in dollars while we lived in Colombia. And that business actually grew. We were able to grow to I think in the third year, we had $600,000 of recurring revenue every year, profitable, break even. And, I remember at that time, 2008 happened. I don't know if anyone recalls what happened to our market in 2008, but the financial crisis, like a ton of bricks, just crushed our market. So overnight, $7 trillion of value kind of evaporated from the real estate market in the US, and our customers were right at the center of this. So it was time to go back to the drawing board. How are we gonna reinvent ourselves? And so we got together, and one thing that we identified was that our customers that we were building websites for, they didn't really need just websites. It was apparent that they needed customers of their own. So again, this experience I had looking for real estate, and the idea was, the seed was planted, maybe we should build a marketplace business that connects these buyers and sellers and aggregates all of this property into one central repository. And so we only had this one small problem. If there's anyone here that's built a marketplace before, it's, you have this cold start problem. It's the chicken and egg dilemma. It's like, what comes first? Is it the chicken or the egg? Do we get the properties or do we get the consumers? And so we needed properties on our website. And so another kind of incident, a moment of serendipity around this time, I randomly receive a message on LinkedIn from a guy by the name of Diego. Now, Diego is Brazilian, and we had studied together in Argentina. And I remember right when he sent the message, I said, he's Brazilian, Brazil's a huge market, let's go build the business there. A few phone calls later, we had him on a plane, sleeping on the couch at Thomas's apartment, and we hatched our plan, translated the website, sent him back with $20,000 to Brazil, and he launched our operation in Sao Paulo. Now, I say operation, this was in a 2x2 meter, little room. And so he launches this business, but we still had that problem of getting properties on the site. And so we ended up coming up with a very clever strategy. As a gringo, I would call, he would write a script in Portuguese. He would say, when they say this, you say this. When they say this, so I'm on the phone calling these real estate brokers, and they thought that I was a buyer, this American guy maybe buying real estate, and they would instantly put me in contact with the owner of the brokerage. So we were successful in getting our initial customers onto some free trials, and now we had some inventory in our marketplace, and consumers could see the properties, and we could generate value. 6 months later, we go visit these companies. We have no idea if we generated enough value, and it turns out there's a $5,000 contract, first customer, second customer, $5,000, prepaid for a year. One day we have $10,000 from nothing to $10,000, and it was kind of the day one for us. It was the moment we realized there actually might be a business here. So we needed to now scale this business, and we didn't have access to any capital. So I ended up contacting a guy who was this Australian guy who had built one of the largest online real estate businesses in the world. Today it's a $10 billion market cap company. And I sent him a cold message on LinkedIn, and I saw that he was gonna be speaking at a conference like this in San Francisco. And so I sent him a message on Facebook and said, hey, I'm gonna be at the conference. Wasn't gonna be at the conference, but I wanted to connect with this guy. He ended up responding to my message on Facebook. We met at a cafe, and I went and pitched him the business. I was excited, we had some customers, we were growing, and I remember he took diligent notes the entire time. At the end of the conversation, he said, so Brian, how much money are you looking to raise? I kind of swallowed, like nervous, and I said, we're raising $1 million at a $5 million valuation. Kind of looks at me, looks at his notepad, looks at me again, slams his notepad shut, and he says, we're in one of the worst financial crises in decades, and you're a bit delusional. And then he kind of stormed out of the, now, given that I was a complete neophyte, newbie to this whole fundraising game, I remember 10 minutes later, I called him. He obviously didn't answer. Simon, how about $1 million? How about $1 million for 25%, a $4 million valuation? Just complete rookie at this game. So the only option we had at the time, which is the logical step that any entrepreneur would make, maybe, is I went to my wife and I said, we've got this asset, this apartment we've been saving up and we bought. Let's sell the house, sell the apartment, and put all the money into the business. Yeah, Latina, casa, Imagínate cómo fue. So she somehow went along with that. God bless her. And we put all this money into the business, and we moved to Sao Paulo, and I moved into the living room of my other co-founder with my wife, 1-bedroom apartment, and we spent months there working. This is us in the living room. Now, you can see she's smiling right here, but let me tell you, it was not a lot of smiles around this time. It was very intense. To make matters even harder, we were also trying to get pregnant during this time. So, building a business, trying to have a baby, a 1-bedroom apartment and your co-founder is not a very conducive place to be conceiving a baby. You have to get creative. I won't get into details. But and I remember right around this time, there was a moment where she looked at me and I could tell with her eyes like something, she communicated with her eyes. She was distressed. And so we walked downstairs, and I'll never forget, probably one of the lowest moments of my entrepreneurial journey. And there was water flowing in the streets. Like I can vividly remember just torrential rains. And she looks at me and she says, ¿Qué diablos estamos haciendo acá? What the hell are we doing here? Why don't we go back to Bogota, California? And I remember it was probably the lowest that I can recall my feeling. Just felt terrible. And I just said, you have to trust me. It's gonna work out. And she kind of wiped the tears away, and we went back upstairs. And it wasn't any easier the coming months. We got to the point where we were growing the business, but we were about to run out of money. And then Simon Baker comes back into the picture, this guy, after 2 years of trying to get him. And we invited him to come to Brazil, be a speaker at an event like this. It was, first we hired him to be a consultant, and we figured, how are we gonna pay him? So we invited a bunch of customers, and we charged money to hear him speak. We made enough money from the event to pay him back, and then he was impressed because we signed our first customers, and he ended up saving the company. We had $87 in the bank, 25 employees, and I can remember I was physically sick from the stress, and the $300,000 wire hit our account. And so from that point on, things really scaled. You can see this is, you can't see it up there, but picture of things really scaled, things took off, but the stress and the challenge of it all, and everyone that's an entrepreneur in here, it's just so hard to build a business. And so I struggled. I remember at the time I had some bouts with, panic attacks, and it wasn't until I found this group of other entrepreneurs that really the community that would elevate me. And it really resonated with what Barry said about having a community to support you. So I ended up connecting with a few other entrepreneurs, David Velez, the founder of Nubank, you probably have heard of him, and a handful of others, and we formed this group called the Breakfast Club. Now the Breakfast Club, we would get together, we would support each other through the difficulties, and we'd really just elevate each other and try to help each other in this process. And so, fast forward to wrap up this story here, March 4th, 2020, you can all think of the backdrop of what's going on in the world at that time. We signed the deal to sell our company. And I'm in this deep introspective process about what's next. And I remember there's this quote that I really like. When you think of a canvas, you need to take a step back and think about things, but it's hard to see when you're in the middle of the grind, in the middle of the hustle. So if you're an entrepreneur right now and you're in the thick of it, it's hard to realize what's going on step by step. It's kind of a canvas. Like every little pixel that you're painting is there, and you can't see, the art that's being built, but when you take a step back, you can actually see what's been painted. And so I came back to this concept of ikigai, which is a combination of what you love, what you're good at, how you can be paid, and it's a mix of all of these things, and it's really that purpose. And so I want to leave 3 things with you that I really reflect on as an entrepreneur, and that I think will be helpful for any entrepreneur that's in the struggle, because it can be very tough, this journey. The first one, if you have purpose, you can endure the entrepreneurial winters, those moments of difficulty. Remind yourself of why you're doing it, and that'll get you through those dark times. The second thing, manufacture your own serendipity. You're gonna be faced with obstacles as entrepreneurs. It's your opportunity to figure out how to make those things work. My dad used to always say, there's no future in being a pessimist. So when you hit an obstacle, a snag, figure out a way around, and that's when you grow the most. And lastly, I think is the most relevant for everyone here right now is find your community, right? And I think at Volcano, this is my first time being back for a little while, and being here and seeing this energy and seeing the community. Maybe your future investors here, maybe your future business partners here, maybe it's someone that's just gonna be a support system when things are really difficult. And so that's the last thing, and I had a quote that I was gonna show, but it's a quote from Albert Camus, and it's, in the midst of winter, I found within me, there was an invincible summer. So figure out your invincible summer, adaptar y superar, and let's keep building, okay? Thank you, appreciate it.